Welcome to According to Sam, folks. This is episode 297. Thank you so much for joining me today. I have a really good podcast for you. Going to pick up where I left off talking about, we were talking about Elon Musk in the last podcast and the deranged epidemic of mental illness going on, not only here in the United States, but nationwide. And today, we're going to pick up talking about, Elon Musk. We're going to talk about DOGE, and we're going to get back into talking about why Elon Musk and DOGE and the job that they're doing and attempting to cut government spending, balance the budget, cut the deficit, why this mission is needed, why it's so needed at this moment in 2025 with our nation $37 trillion in debt. We're going to get back into talking about how we got into we're $36.6 trillion, closer to $37 trillion in debt than 36. So I'm going to go ahead and say we're $37 trillion in debt because we'll be at 37 trillion in no time. So we're going to talk about how we got into so much debt, $37 trillion in debt. Started talking about it a few weeks ago. Beginning in the 1990s. And if you remember, I was telling you that I believe that there is a correlation between debt and deficit and war. And there is also a correlation between peace and prosperity. A lot of the cause of the debt that we have, the $37 trillion in debt that we have, goes back to the war on terrorism, the global war on terrorism that we spent 2 decades fighting after 9/11. But there are more crises and things that contributed to that debt, and we're going to get into all of it. But going back to the last podcast, talking about the woke mind virus and this epidemic of mental illness that is going on, not only here in the United States, but all over Western civilization. This is in Canada, this first clip that I have. And I want to play this clip to get us started. These are people in Ottawa, in Canada, and they are protesting Elon Musk at a dealership there, a Tesla dealership there in Ottawa. And this guy confronts him. Look at this guy with his colored hair. Hair looks like cotton candy. But this, the guy with the camera confronts the people protesting, and he's asking them, "You're here in Ottawa. DOGE doesn't have any effect on the budget here in Canada. It doesn't have any effect on cutting the bureaucracy here in Canada. That's all going on in America. So what is your purpose?" This guy asked them, "What's your purpose of protesting Elon Musk in Canada?" Take a listen.
You're out here protesting Tesla in Ottawa. What are you hoping to accomplish?
To send a message to Tesla, their stockholders, their potential customers, that this is bad.
This is bad.
What is bad?
What is bad?
Yes.
What is bad?
Yes.
What is Elon Musk doing that is bad?
Sure, go ahead.
DOGE?
DOGE is bad. How is DOGE bad?
Horrible.
How?
DOGE is horrible.
Because it cut off USAID funding?
Really? People have died because of that.
Because they've cut
People
off
have died
USAID
because of
funding? Is that
DOGE.
why? Like, why?
There's that. There's that. Shit. People have died.
People have
Who
died.
has died?
People have
Who has died?
Like there in Africa. Yeah.
Why is it the U.S.'s job to take care of the world, first of all? And second of all, how can you guarantee that money is not going to left-wing NGOs? Is that what you're about?
Fuck if it goes left-wing NGOs.
Of course you don't, because that's what you want.
So they're
not about like
they're in Ottawa protesting Elon Musk. The guy asked them, "Why are you protesting Elon Musk?" They say because of DOGE, because Elon Musk is on a mission to cut the federal budget and cut bureaucracy in the United States, which has no effect on them at all. They live in Canada, and they're protesting Elon Musk there because of DOGE. Just wanted to play that to reiterate that these people have a mental illness. These people are brain dead, and it's not only here in the United States. Again, it's all over Western civilization, in Canada, in Europe. They have no idea, they're are riled up by the media and they go out to protest against Elon Musk because of what he's doing in the United States that has no effect on them at all. And this guy says people have died because of DOGE, which is absolutely ridiculous. But it just goes back to the point that I was making in the last podcast, is that these people are mentally ill. All right. So let's get into, talking about what DOGE is doing and why it's needed. Again, we're $36.6 trillion in debt. We're on the verge of hitting $37 trillion in debt. We just hit $36 trillion in debt about 6-7 weeks ago. So we are rapidly adding $1 trillion to the national debt. Every color here represents $1 trillion. And if you see, it goes back to 1996 here. It took from 1996 to 2002 to add $1 trillion to the national debt. And then from 2002 to 2004 to add $1 trillion. And from 2004 to 2006 to add $1 trillion. And then now we're adding $1 trillion every 90 to 120 days. We're adding $1 trillion to our national debt. So we're going to talk about how we amassed all this debt. I want to start with this clip. This is a clip of John Curtis. John Curtis is a new senator from Utah. He took Mitt Romney's seat, and he's on Meet the Press. And I want you to take a listen to this conversation they're having here.
Sure. Elon Musk at the forefront of these cuts. They say that is Congress's job. What say you, Senator? Should this be the job of Congress? Do you have the oversight responsibility for these cuts?
First of all, let's acknowledge that their anger and their fear is real, right? And I think that's what I learned going
it's not real.
State.
It's irrational.
But I think it's this false narrative that somehow somebody can't get involved that's not an elected official, or just because they're a billionaire, they're a bad person, right? President Trump can consult anybody he wants to. Elon Musk is not making any cuts. He's only suggesting the cuts, and then President Trump is making the cuts.
Now, Elon Musk isn't making any cuts. The executive branch is making the cuts. The Elon Musk is only doing the investigation and finding out where the cuts need to be happening, and then he's recommending that to the president, and the president's making the cuts.
Right? President Trump can consult anybody he wants to. Elon Musk is not making any cuts. He's only suggesting the cuts, and then President Trump is making the cuts.
Let me ask you, because Elon Musk ruffled some feathers when he referred to Social Security, something that he's also eyeing as a part of his DOGE efforts, as a Ponzi scheme.
Listen how she says it, as a Ponzi scheme, So everybody got, their feathers ruffled because you can't touch our Social Security. That's what everybody's angry about, is about these entitlements. You can't touch our Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security, which make up 50% of our $6 trillion budget. $6.5 trillion budget is what our budget is. $6.5 trillion is our federal budget right now. And 50% of that is Social Security and Medicaid. And people are, they are so distraught and they're worked up about the fact that Congress has to address this. This is a huge problem. Our Social Security problem, as you're going to see, has been a problem for a long time. Medicaid, Medicare, these entitlement programs make up 50% of the federal budget, and they are a huge problem because the problem is that they're not going to be solvent in the future, that we're not going to have the money to pay for Social Security in the future. We're not going to have the money to pay for Medicaid and Medicare in the future if changes are not made to these entitlement programs. So she's here talking to Senator Curtis here, and she says, well, Elon Musk says that Social Security is a Ponzi scheme. It's a Ponzi scheme.
Some feathers when he referred to Social Security, something that he's also eyeing as a part of his DOGE efforts, as a Ponzi scheme. Senator, do you see Social Security as a Ponzi scheme?
Well, I wouldn't use those words, but we're not being honest either with people. And that's why you'll actually...
He's right. He says, I wouldn't use those words, Ponzi scheme. I would. What's a Ponzi scheme? Ponzi scheme, what happened with Bernie Madoff? Bernie Madoff was taking money from investors and he was paying out other people that had invested with him with the money from the new investors. So he was taking the money from these new investors and paying out people that had invested with him earlier, and he was running a Ponzi scheme. Nobody realized that Bernie Madoff was running this Ponzi scheme until the economy crashed in 2008, and everybody started calling Bernie Madoff and saying, we want our money back at once. And he didn't have the money to pay them all back because he was running a Ponzi scheme. Absolutely. Social Security is a Ponzi scheme. But Senator Curtis, he says, I don't want to call it a Ponzi scheme because that's not good political rhetoric. And everybody, even Republicans, are pissed off at Elon Musk saying he's going off message on these entitlement programs because he's telling the truth that it's a Ponzi scheme. But even though Senator Curtis here is not going to go as far as Elon Musk and call it a Ponzi scheme, he's going to tell some honest truths about Social Security here.
To Social Security, something that he's also eyeing as a part of his DOGE efforts, as a Ponzi scheme. Senator, do you see Social Security as a Ponzi scheme?
Well, I wouldn't use those words, but we're not being honest either with people. And that's why you'll actually see me in a couple of months introduce a change to Social Security. We're not being honest when we look people in the eye and say we're not going to touch it. If we don't touch it, it touches itself. You know that, right? That's not being honest with the American people. And I think that's one of the things that makes them not trust us when we say
absolutely
something
right
that they just know is not true.
And you're absolutely right. I mean, there's broad agreement that entitlements are not solvent in the long run. But the question
is there broad agreement that entitlements are not solvent in the long run? Because I only hear one side of the political aisle talking about this, talking about the fact that these entitlement programs are not solvent in the long run. If these programs, if they are not solvent in the long run and both sides understand that, then why is there a big fear factor? Why is there so much rhetoric around the fact that the Trump administration and DOGE is looking at ways to make these programs solvent? And to make these programs solvent, it's going to call for some cuts in the waste in both of these programs. There's waste in both of these programs. Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, tons of waste that needs to be cut out. And even when you cut out all that waste and that fraud in these programs, that's not going to make them solvent. There's going to be other reforms that need to be made that maybe means tested these programs, maybe raise the retirement age, something that they were messing around with in France. But to make these programs solvent, there are going to have to be reforms. There's going to have to be cuts made. And if both sides of the political aisle, if Democrats and Republicans, agree that these programs are not solvent the way Kristen Welker says here, then what's the fear and the fear mongering about when Elon Musk and the Trump administration are looking at ways to make these programs solvent?
There's broad agreement that entitlements are not solvent in the long run. But the question is what to do about it. And about 1 in 8 of your constituents actually receive Social Security.
So the question, she says, both sides agree that these programs are not solvent. But the question is what to do about it. So the answer to that question is nothing? Is the answer to that question nothing? When you're saying, what do we do about these two programs that make up 50% of the budget that we both agree, Democrats and Republicans agree that these programs are not solvent and they're not going to be there for Americans in the future. And the only question is, Kristen Welker says, what to do about it. Is the answer to that question nothing? Is nothing what we should be doing about it? Because if nothing is not what we should be doing about it, then we should be doing something about it. And the person who is looking into what we can do about it to make these programs solvent, and it's not only Elon Musk and DOGE, but also members of Congress like Senator Curtis here. He says he's going to introduce a bill, that addresses Social Security. You can't say that we cannot touch these entitlement programs and we can't do anything with these entitlement programs. And then, also admit that these programs are not solvent. That makes no sense at all. This was Jasmine Crockett, and she was on MSNBC today. And I want you to listen to what she says about Social Security.
If you are here undocumented, you are still required to pay taxes. And so guess what? We get up to $100 billion a year in tax revenue from these people. And now you're saying, you know what? Go ahead and violate privacy laws, even though they are trying to contribute to this country. So guess what? People are going to go into the shadows. That's more money that we're going to lose. And we know that he has no intentions of going to his billionaire buddies to go and get that tax revenue. So this is yet another instance of how incompetent they are. Because if we lose those dollars, remember, undocumented people do not collect on Social Security, but they pay into a system that helps to make sure that we can keep Social Security solvent.
So she says she's making a case here that we need undocumented illegal immigration to help pay into Social Security. People, how is this not a Ponzi scheme? Again, back to Bernie Madoff, who was running a Ponzi scheme. He had people that were investing with him, and they had been investing with him, for a long time. And then he was taking on new investors, and he was taking that new investment money and he was paying off dividends to the people that had been investing with him for a long time. And then he was taking on new investors and that new money and paying dividends to the older people. How is Social Security not a Ponzi scheme when they're saying she even admits that Social Security is not solvent? And her answer to the question is how we deal with Social Security is open up the borders, illegal immigrants. The illegal immigrants pay into Social Security and then they're not able to take out of Social Security. So they pay in and they're paying for the retirements of the older Americans. And we need that, is what she says, to make Social Security solvent. I was blown away by this because she's admitting that Social Security is not solvent, but she's also admitting that the Democrats' plan, like we didn't know this, for handling the insolvency of Social Security is illegal immigration. This is what their plan is. And she says that they pay into Social Security. I don't know how undocumented and illegal immigrants pay into Social Security without Social Security numbers, but she says that they pay taxes, they pay into Social Security, and we need illegal immigrants to keep Social Security solvent. That's what she says.
To go and get that tax revenue. So this is yet another instance of how incompetent they are. Because if we lose those dollars, remember, undocumented people do not collect on Social Security, but they pay into a system that helps to make sure that we can keep Social Security solvent.
So that's a Ponzi scheme. That's definitely a Ponzi scheme, and Social Security is a Ponzi scheme. They're lying to people, telling people that this is your money that you paid into Social Security and you're only getting your money back. That's not the case. That the younger generation pays for the Social Security of the older generation. And the people that have been paying into Social Security for decades, the older generation, the baby boomer generation, getting ready to be the Gen X generation going into retirement, the money that those people have been paying in has been used for other things besides Social Security. And that's why it's not solvent. That's why your money that you paid in is not theirs, because Congress has been using Social Security funds for other things. You remember Al Gore in the 2000 election when he was running against George W. Bush. This was a major issue. The surplus was a major issue and what to do with the surplus in that election. But Social Security and Medicaid and these entitlements 25 years ago was a major issue in that election. And you remember what Al Gore says in the debate, how he's going to put Social Security and Medicaid in a lockbox, and it's going to be in a lockbox where Congress can't touch it and Congress can't do anything else with these monies that people have paid into these entitlement programs, and it's going to be in a lockbox where Congress can't do anything with this money other than what this money is purposed for, and paying out Social Security and Medicaid and Medicare benefits. And this was what Al Gore was proposing in that election.
I think that we have got to balance the budget every single year.
Balance the budget every single balance the budget every single year and pay down the national debt. This is what Al Gore was talking about in 2000.
I think that we have got to balance the budget every single year, pay down the national debt, and in fact, under my proposal, the national debt will be completely eliminated by the year 2012.
Under my proposal, the national debt, the entire national debt, all of the debt that the United States had accumulated from the beginning of this country to 2000 when he's saying this, or 2012 when he's projecting, and he wasn't the only one projecting this, projecting that the United States was going to be completely debt-free by 2012 is what he says. We got to balance the budget and we're going to get rid of the entire national debt in 2000 is what Al Gore was talking about.
Balance the budget every single year, pay down the national debt, and in fact, under my proposal, the national debt will be completely eliminated by the year 2012. I think we need to put Medicare and Social Security in a lockbox. The governor will not put Medicare in a lockbox. I don't think it should be used as a piggy bank for other programs. I think it needs to be moved out of the budget and protected. I'll veto anything that takes money out of Social Security or Medicare for anything other than Social
Security or Medicare. So, I mean, this is what Al Gore was running on. He was running on taking it away from Congress. He said they used it as a piggy bank. Social Security and Medicare was their little piggy bank. He said, I'll take it. I'll put it in a lockbox where Congress, take it out of the budget where Congress can't touch it. So yes, when you pay into it, the money that you pay in, then you get back. But Congress has been messing with, Al Gore didn't win this election. And Social Security and Medicaid was not put into a lockbox. And Congress has been using Social Security and Medicaid as their piggy bank, like he says. And it's been this was 25 years ago. So it's been a big issue for 25 years. We're 25 years down the road now. This was Saturday Night Live. You remember Saturday Night Live? During that election, they actually were making fun of Al Gore, talking about the lockbox and how he was going to put Social Security and Medicaid in the lockbox.
My plan, Jim, is different. Rather than squander the surplus on a risky tax cut for the wealthy, I would put it in what I call a lockbox.
Governor Bush, your response.
I don't know what that was all about. But I will tell you this. Don't mess with Texas.
So the lockbox that Al Gore was talking about never came into fruition. And yes, Social Security is a Ponzi scheme. So we're going to talk a lot about Al Gore and the Clinton administration in this podcast because we're asking the question and we're explaining how we amassed all of this debt, $37 trillion in debt. Where did this debt come from? And we started talking about this a few podcasts ago. We were talking about the decade of the 1990s. And we started off talking about the Bush administration, this Bush, George H.W. Bush, and the last 2 years of his administration. I was explaining the Gulf War, how he took us into Iraq, and we're talking about Ambassador Gillespie, how Gillespie gave Saddam Hussein the green light to invade Kuwait, and then he invades Kuwait, and then George H.W. Bush comes out, this will not stand, we need to go to the UN. And then remember, they brought in the actors from Kuwait, lying about Saddam Hussein and saying that he took the babies out of the incubators and put them on the floor, the Iraqis. And this was all to get the UN resolution, to get the UN to back this mission into Iraq. And that's how the decade of the 1990s started with the war in Iraq, but it quickly ended. The United States, along with the UN, showed a tremendous show of force. And in 1991, the Soviet Union fell. So beginning in the 1990s, ending with the Gulf War and the fall of the Soviet Union, the United States is the lone superpower going into the 1990s. The United States is it has an amazing military might. It has amazing wealth, and we are the sole superpower on this planet in the beginning of the 1990s. And then in 1992, you have the election. George H.W. Bush is running for re-election, and he's being challenged by William Jefferson Clinton. And then he's also being challenged by a very popular businessman who was running as an independent, as a third-party candidate, and that was H. Ross Perot. H. Ross Perot was like the Donald Trump of the 1990s, and instead of running as a Republican to win the nomination from George Bush, he ran as an independent. He was more conservative minded. He could have ran as a Republican and challenged Bush for the nomination, but he decided to run as an independent to challenge the two-party system, the two-party dominance of the two political parties. And he ran as an independent and challenged George H.W. Bush, along with Bill Clinton challenging George H.W. Bush. So this is where the national debt was in 1990, 1991, 1992. So we'll start in 1990. It says right here, first Iraq War, the Gulf War, the debt in 1990, the total national debt in 1990 was a little bit over $3 trillion. You can actually, if you go to the debt clock and you go to time machine here at the top of the debt clock, you can go to the 1990s, and this tells you on this day in 1990, this is where the national debt was, just under $3 trillion. On March 24th, 1990, the national debt was just under $3 trillion. Now, go back to what Al Gore says here. He says that under his plan, $3 trillion. $3 trillion is where the debt was in 1990. And in, so Al Gore's, he and Clinton are running in 92. In 92, it's $4 trillion. $4 trillion in 92. The national debt right now is $37 trillion. $37 trillion. So, I mean, this is crazy how much debt we've added. $37 trillion. And back in 1992, it was $4 trillion. So it says right here, 1990, $3 trillion, Iraq War, and then you had a recession in 1991, national debt, $3 trillion. And then that year of the 92 election, the national debt was $4 trillion. In 2000, when Al Gore is here talking about eliminating the entire national debt by 2012, the national debt was $5 trillion, a little bit over $5 trillion is where it was. And Al Gore was, I mean, when he's talking about the national debt being eliminated by the year 2022, that's no joke. That Clinton's, his Treasury Department, we've talked about this many times before. If you followed this podcast, that a secret document that came public because of a FOIA request in 2011, NPR made this document public, and it was a secret document that was called Life After Debt, and it was identifying as a crisis that the United States was going to be debt-free by 2012. So the United States had a real opportunity of paying off all of its debt and being completely debt-free by 2012. It's no joke. We're going to talk more about this document here. Clinton is running against George H.W. Bush along with H. Ross Perot. The thing you got to understand about Bill Clinton and George H.W. Bush is that they had a relationship going back before this election, going back to when at the beginning of the Reagan administration, and I believe that this relationship between George H.W. Bush and Bill Clinton goes back even before the Reagan administration. But during the Reagan administration, William Jefferson Clinton was the governor of Arkansas, and George H.W. Bush was the vice president. And when they were running the Iran-Contra scandal, when they were the Iran-Contra operation, particularly the part about the Contras, flying guns down to the rebels there in Nicaragua that were fighting against the Sandinistas, the Contras. We were flying illegally against the Bolin Act. The Bolin Act that was passed by Congress, it basically prevented the Bush administration from funding the Contras with weapons and supporting them with weapons. So this was going on behind Congress's back. This was completely illegal. And the flights that were taking place that were taking the guns down to Central America, also bringing Central American cocaine back into the United States because they were selling cocaine and crack so they can fund these weapons down to this was all happening from Arkansas, the Mena, Arkansas. If you want to watch a great documentary, you can find it on YouTube. It's called The Mena Connection. These flights were going out of Arkansas down to Central America, and George H.W. Bush, as vice president and former CIA director, they were running all of this out of the CIA, and he and Bill Clinton had a relationship prior to this 2000 or this 1992 election. I have this clip. I just want you to watch a little bit of this. This is just a few clips that make the case that this relationship between the Bushes and the Clintons go back years.
Your husband and Bill Clinton have become good friends.
That's right. My husband, Bill Clinton, and I have become great friends. And Bill visits us every summer. And
Bill visits us every summer. Bill visits us every summer. Me and George, we just love Bill.
Bill's father wasn't around. And I think that he thinks of George a little bit like the father he didn't have.
Like the father he didn't have. Bill Clinton thinks of George H.W. Bush like the father he didn't have. And this father-son relationship, what I'm telling you, goes back before the 1992 election. You just have to understand that.
And he's very loving to him. And I really appreciate that.
I'm doing it. My mother calls me my fourth brother. Calls him my fourth brother. Is that right? The black sheep of the family.
May all the Democrats forgive me this close to the election. I love George Bush.
I love George Bush, Bill Clinton says. So this father-son love relationship goes back before the 1992 election. And they were running a little game on the American public because George H.W. Bush, he meant for Bill Clinton to win that election. It was meant for Bill Clinton to be the president of the United States going into 2093. And this guy, H. Ross Perot, getting in the election, he was trying to throw a monkey wrench into their little game that they were playing on the American people for Bill Clinton to be president of the United States. And Ross Perot was challenging them and he was winning. And I have a clip here about H. Ross Perot dropping out when he was leading in the polls in 1992. And people have theorized why he dropped out of the race. But H. Ross Perot says that he was blackmailed and, they did something to make him, drop out of the race. Before we play this clip, I just want to remind you of the quote from Carol Quigley from the, book Tragedy and Hope about the Anglo-American Empire. And Carol Quigley writes in Tragedy and Hope that the argument that the two parties should represent opposite ideals and policies, one perhaps from the right and the other from the left, is a foolish idea acceptable only to doctrinaire and academic thinkers. Instead, the two parties should be almost identical so that the American people can throw the rascals out at any election without leading to any profound or extensive shifts in policies. That's what the two-party system is set up. That doesn't matter who you get. If you get George H.W. Bush or if you get Clinton, you're not going to get any major shifts in policies. You're going to get the same trade policies. You're going to get the same foreign policy. You're going to get the same domestic policy. You're going to get the same policy. It doesn't matter if you go red or if you go blue. And H. Ross Perot was he was really challenging the two-party dominance, the two-party system, and he was coming with some grand ideas on how to have major shifts and major changes in policy. All right, let's watch this clip about the 1992 election and Ross Perot.
It's spring 1992. The American two-party system is on the verge of collapse, or at least a minor setback. Third-party candidates never get any vote share. But 1992 saw a strong third-party candidate. And he wasn't just making a little noise. He was leading in the polls heading into the summer months. A victory by Ross Perot would change the American political system forever. But then suddenly, Perot vanishes from the race. And over the coming years, he'll fade into increasing obscurity and unpopularity. So why would a frontrunner remove himself from the presidential race? Perot claims he was blackmailed in July 1992, but others have their own theories.
Outside, looking at the stars, staring. Good evening. Welcome to this third and final debate among the three major candidates for President of the United States. Governor Bill Clinton, the Democratic nominee. President George Bush, the Republican nominee. And independent candidate Ross Perot. We can take this outside, looking at the stars, staring in my mouth wide. I ain't letting nobody stop me this time. Every single
Oh yeah, also, before I forget, Ross Perot was an extremely short man. Not that matters one way or another, but yes, that is one thing we're going to want to note here. 5'4", potentially 5'5", somewhere in that range. You know, he'd probably be listed as 5'7", 5'8" on a basketball roster, but yeah, it wasn't even close to that. So 1992, the incumbent president was George H.W. Bush, and he was coming off 8 years of the Reagan presidency. He was Reagan's VP, and he was kind of riding on that popularity. In the middle of Bush's term, he was the most popular president ever, approval rating-wise. The Gulf War had helped with this some. And the feeling was that his re-election was all but a sure thing. I mean, an incumbent with approval ratings in the 80%, upper 80% is just crazy. So none of the big-name Democratic politicians really wanted to enter the race this cycle, and assuming they would just lose and kind of lose their shot at their presidential run. And Bush was actually so popular that SNL made a skit. It was called something like, well, the sentiment was it was all these Democratic politicians arguing over who should be the nominee that cycle, but they all want someone else to be the nominee because none of them wants to go run and lose to Bush. So
Campaign 92, the race to avoid being the guy who loses to Bush.
If the Democratic Party were to make me its candidate in 1992, it would go down to its worst defeat in history.
Oh, come on, Mario. You're probably the best candidate we've got.
That's just kind of shows what the feeling was at the time.
All right. So we all know what happened. Ross Perot ends up dropping out. When he does get back in, when he gets back in, he doesn't have nearly the support that he had before he dropped out. And then Bill Clinton and Al Gore win the 1992 election, and they come in on a radical platform to cut government, to cut the size of government, to make government more efficient. Everything that DOGE and Elon Musk are doing now, these guys did back in the 1990s. Everything. We were going into peacetime. The Gulf War was over. The Soviet Union had just fallen. We were the the sole superpower on this planet. We had a powerful military that we're not fighting any wars, and all of our allies are our next biggest spenders in military. Why do we need this bloated military? The Soviet Union just fell. So they're not only going to cut the military, they're going to cut the government, they're going to cut bureaucracy. They are going to balance the budget, and they're actually successful at what they do. I have this clip of Bill Clinton. This is a clip of Bill Clinton just 4 weeks after he was sworn in February of 1993. Take a listen to Bill Clinton.
First, I am ordering a reduction of the federal bureaucracy by at least 100,000 positions over the next 4 years.
100,000 positions. I'm cutting the jobs of federal workers. 100,000 federal workers are going to lose their jobs, is what this guy says.
Of the federal bureaucracy by at least 100,000 positions over the next 4 years. At least 10% of these cuts must come from senior management. These cuts will make our government more efficient and more effective.
10% from senior management. Wow. Did anybody protest?
Next 4 years. At least 10% of these cuts must come from senior management. These cuts will make our government more efficient and more effective. The government is full of dedicated people whose hard work is being choked off by our own bureaucracy. Second, I'm ordering each federal department and agency to reduce its administrative as opposed to its program cost by 12% over the next 4 years. With better planning and innovation, we can make better use of the money we already have. In many agencies, overhead is too high, red tape is too thick, and the day-to-day operations of the agencies have not been re-examined in a very long time. I am today ordering the elimination of hundreds of unproductive and duplicative advisory commissions that have spread across this government like kudzu. I'm asking the Office of Management and Budget to eliminate at least 1/3 of the 700 advisory boards and commissions that were not created by Congress. Wow. From now on, agencies and departments will not be allowed to create new commissions without permissions from OMB. We simply cannot allow the federal bureaucracy to beget more bureaucracy. We have run a horrendous government deficit. The deficit is now 4 times as big as it was in 1980. We have seen spending go up in areas that the government would have to move to control, mostly health care, and then interest on the debt, because when the deficit gets bigger and bigger and bigger, you spend more money on the debt. So we have reduced investment, increased the debt, moved money upward so that there's been much more inequality of income distribution. We must reduce the government's debt. Why? Why? Because if the debt gets bigger and bigger and bigger, 2 bad things happen. Bad thing number 1 is that Congress spends more of your tax money every year paying interest on the debt than investing in your future. It's now up to 15 cents on the dollar. If we do not change present spending patterns, when you hear people oppose the program I outlined, ask them what the cost of the status quo is.
Ask him what the cost of the stat. That's a great question. Ask him what the cost of the status quo is. Now, remember, when Bill Clinton was saying this is 1993, the national debt was $4 trillion. $4 trillion in 1993 when Bill Clinton is saying that. The national debt right now is 36.6, almost $37 trillion. And he says, ask the question. When people are complaining about the cuts, ask the question, then, what's the cost of doing nothing? What's the cost of doing nothing, people?
Bad thing number 1 is that Congress spends more of your tax money every year paying interest on the debt than investing in your future. It's now up to 15 cents on the dollar. If we do not change present spending patterns, when you hear people oppose the program I outlined, ask them what the cost of the status quo is. If we behave for 4 years, if we behave for 4 more years like we have for the last 12, here's what will happen. By the end of the decade, the deficit will be $650 billion a year, and we'll be spending about 22 cents of every one of your tax dollars just paying interest on the debt.
$600 billion deficit. Boy, that sounds beautiful. I would kill for a $600 billion deficit. But this is what Bill Clinton was saying back then. He and Al Gore, they came in on a mission, and their mission was reinventing government. Rego is what they called it for short. The National Partnership for Reinventing Government. The National Partnership for Reinventing Government, NPR, was a U.S. government reform initiative launched in 1993 by Vice President Al Gore and Bill Clinton. Its goal was to make the federal government work better, efficiency, work better, cost less, and to get results Americans care about. The initiative aimed at streamlining process, cutting bureaucracies. That means cutting jobs. People got fired. Tons of people got fired, with a focus on overhead costs beyond the issues addressable by statute, and implemented innovative solutions. NPR was active until 1998. Well, you didn't need it after 1998 because we had budget surpluses. We had balanced the budget in 1998. DOGE, meet Rego. 32 years before Elon Musk, Al Gore did it. Al Gore did Rego. Last 140 years have been littered with promises by presidents to fix the federal bureaucracy. For 140 years is what this says, the CNN article. For 140 years, multiple presidents have said that we need to fix the federal bureaucracy. We need to balance the budget and cut the deficit. And Bill Clinton and Al Gore did it. They came in and they did it. Now people are saying that that what Bill Clinton and what Al Gore did in the 1990s is different somehow than what Donald Trump and Elon Musk are trying to do in 2025. This is an ABC article. Musk compares DOGE to Clinton's government efficiency initiative, but there are big differences. Clinton reduced the federal workforce by more than 377,000 employees lost their job. 377,000 employees lost their job during the Clinton administration. They're saying that it's different. Elon Musk is making comparisons to the Clinton administration in the 1990s, and NBC News says it's different. That what Elon Musk and Trump are doing now is different. How is it different?
The people voted for major government reform, and that's what the people are going to get.
On the chopping block this week, tens of thousands of federal jobs.
We want to downsize government, but make it better.
We want to downsize government, but make it better. I mean, how's this different from the clips that you just heard of Bill Clinton and Al Gore, or Bill Clinton saying that he wanted to do in his first year in office, that he wanted to downsize government and make it better? That's what Bill Clinton was doing. That's what Donald Trump says here. We want to downsize government and make it better. How's it different?
A majority of the public voting for President Trump. We won the House. We won the Senate. The people voted for major government reform, and that's what the people are going to get.
On the chopping block this week, tens of thousands of federal jobs.
We want to downsize government, but make it better. Run it better, but downsize.
The administration first targeting the roughly 200,000 federal employees who have been on the job less than a year or two. At least a dozen departments and agencies impacted.
So
at the Department of Energy, at least 2,000 workers let
Bill
go.
Clinton did this.
More than 1,000 people fired from Veterans Affairs.
Bill Clinton did this. But what you got to understand, and Al Gore, they did this in the 1990s. But what you got to understand is, like I was explaining in the podcast before last, and we were talking about all of the government spending that the Democrats did in Joe Biden's first 2 years. The first 45 days in Joe Biden's administration, they passed a $2 trillion, $1.9 trillion stimulus. And then in the first 2 quarters in that following year, the growth was negative. First 2 quarters, that's a recession. First 2 quarters in 2023 Biden sworn in 2021. So 2022, first 2 quarters in 2022, we had negative growth. So we get the numbers of the second quarter's negative growth in July. And then in August, they passed, Democrats alone, without a single Republican vote, pass another $1 trillion stimulus that they fused into the economy. So what you got to understand, what they were doing with all of this spending over $3 trillion in stimulus over 2 years, they were hiring people, and most of the jobs when Joe Biden's, he is celebrating and bragging about how many jobs he created. Well, first of all, we shut down the entire economy during COVID in 2020. And all of these people in service jobs, we paid them $700 a week to stay home during COVID. All of that stuff added to the debt, and it was all unnecessary. I mean, it's ridiculous the way that we handled COVID. But all these people had lost their jobs. The economy was shut down. So when Joe Biden comes in 2021, and we have the vaccine, we open, the country back up. And yes, Biden's going to add jobs. It didn't take an Einstein to see that many of these jobs, the majority of these jobs, are people just going back to work. But Biden's taking credit for all these jobs that he created in his first 2 years. But another source of all of these jobs that Joe Biden was creating was this money that they were appropriating for stimulus to stimulate the economy. The government was hiring. The government was bringing on all these people into the government bureaucracy, and those were a lot of the jobs that were created. It was government jobs. So that's a large part of why Donald Trump and Elon Musk are handling these cuts these ways, because most of these people were newly hired. So if they're newly hired on a probationary period because the Joe Biden administration hired all these government workers to show growth in the economy, they're on their probationary periods. And the government, we don't really need those people. So, of course, Donald Trump and Elon Musk are cutting those jobs.
Make it better. Run it better, but downsize.
The administration first targeting the roughly 200,000 federal employees who have been on the job less than a year or two. At least a dozen departments and agencies impacted.
200,000 that's been
energy the block this week. Tens of thousands.
200,000 jobs that have been on the job for less than a year. Or a year and a half. These are all the jobs that the Democrats were creating with the stimulus money that they appropriated.
Thousands of federal jobs.
We want to downsize government, but make it better. Run it better, but downsize.
The administration first targeting the roughly 200,000 federal employees who have been on the job less than a year or two. At least a dozen departments and agencies impacted. At the Department of Energy, at least 2,000 workers let go. More than 1,000 people fired from Veterans Affairs, and at least 1,300 from the Centers for Disease Control.
So many of these jobs are people that were newly hired, and they were newly hired by Democrats during the Biden administration to show these, job numbers and how great he was as a job creator. It's absolutely ridiculous. But they're saying now that Elon Musk and what Elon Musk and what Trump are doing is different from what Clinton and Gore did. That it's different somehow. And they're trying to make the case that it's different. This is a clip from Face the Nation just 2 days ago. The difference between Elon Musk's DOGE cuts and Clinton's Rego initiative. So what's the difference, CBS?
That was Bill Clinton, president back then, asking some pretty probing questions about government efficiency and his efforts at reinventing government. That's what they call it. It was an initiative that flowed through his entire administration, both terms, that did, in fact, reduce the size of the federal workforce by about 429,000
highly
employees.
successful.
Now, that might seem, at first glance, similar to what Elon Musk is up to. But the administrator of that Clinton-era program tells our Robert Costa that DOGE is going about it the wrong way.
There's a total lack of transparency. We don't know
That's a lie.
who they're cutting. There's no rationale for
That's
why
a lie.
they're cutting.
And there is a rationale. There is a rationale. You don't need them. You don't need them. And they were hired by the Biden administration to show job growth. And I mean, we don't need them. Did Clinton show a rationale? When Clinton, in this clip that I played for you, where Clinton is saying, are you going to cut all these jobs and we're going to cut 10%. Does he give a rationale? What are you talking about? There's no rationale.
Think about it the wrong way.
There's a total lack of transparency. We don't know who they're cutting. There's no rationale for why they're cutting. They're saying these people are wasteful.
This is the rationale, lady, right here. There's your rationale for why they're cutting. Same rationale that Clinton had, but the problem's even worse now. Clinton only was dealing with a $4-5 trillion budget. We have $30 trillion more in debt than when Clinton was doing it. You're talking about rationale.
What do you mean? What are they doing that is a waste of taxpayers' money? We've gotten none of this. This is just a sort of slash and burn exercise.
Robert Costa joins me now. That's kind of the point, the slash and burn part of it.
Yeah, that is the point.
To do it in public and to do it with people in Washington and lots of other agencies to be freaked out. The Trump White House wants that absorbed by the public at large and specifically Trump supporters.
That's exactly right, Major. In terms of the idea, there is an overlap between what happened in the early 1990s, and you've documented it so well in your own report.
Of course there's an overlap.
The Enduring Revolution. There was an impetus in both parties in the early 90s to shrink the federal government. Why? There was a belief
and to modernize it and make it more tech savvy if possible.
That's exactly right. It was during the dawn of the internet age, and there was a belief that government could be reformed, overhauled, and made smaller. What's different now with Elon Musk, as we've covered at CBS, and I've spent some time at Sunday Morning doing this, is the method. It's the method of Elon Musk is so different than what we saw with Elaine K. Mark and the Clinton administration. And it's even different than what we saw with former House Speaker Newt Gingrich and his efforts in 1995 to really disrupt the federal government. You see now the executive branch acting in a much more aggressive way. In the 1990s, there was a belief.
They're not telling you how it's different. He's just telling you that Trump's being more aggressive than Clinton. I mean, how is he being more aggressive than Clinton? And Clinton was successful. I mean, and Clinton was, and Gore were able to balance the budget and even gave us a surplus. Yes, Trump is probably more aggressive, but Trump needs to be more aggressive. Trump's dealing with $30 trillion more than what Clinton and Gore were dealing with back in 1993. These people are ridiculous.
In his efforts in 1995 to really disrupt the federal government, you see now the executive branch acting in a much more aggressive way. In the 1990s, there was a belief that the norms still mattered, that you wanted to have kind of this blue ribbon commission, this initiative, you wanted to go through Congress.
Have these things flow through Congress, the workforce reductions through attrition, not filling positions, letting things sort of atrophy on their own without taking the symbolic or actual chainsaw to the federal workforce right off the jump.
Yeah, the reason that they're using a chainsaw and the reason that they're making such drastic cuts now is because, I mean, yes, you're saying that Trump is more aggressive. It's kind of the same thing that Bill Clinton was doing in the 1990s, but Donald Trump and Elon Musk are more aggressive. Well, they have to be more aggressive because the debt is much more serious than it was back in 1993, when it was $4 trillion. We're dealing with $30 trillion more. Bill Clinton in this clip is talking about how much of the interest on the debt is being wasted on paying interest. I don't know what it was back here in 1993, but I know that the interest right now is $1 trillion. We pay $1 trillion in interest right now. So yes, they're saying that loosely, that what Donald Trump and what Elon Musk are doing are connected to what Al Gore and Bill Clinton did in the 1990s. But Donald Trump and Elon are more aggressive. But Donald Trump and Elon Musk are their method is more harsh or whatever than what Clinton and Gore. Yes, because we need it now more, because now we have $30 trillion more in debt than what Bill Clinton and what Al Gore were dealing with. So yes, of course that the situation has changed. And yes, Donald Trump and Elon Musk are being more aggressive, but they have to be more aggressive because that's the situation we find ourselves in. So I was going to get into the base closements, the BRAC commission. This was a part of the cuts and cutting the military. Again, the Cold War was over. In the Soviet Union fell in 1991, the year before Bill Clinton is running for president. So, again, in 1992, when Bill Clinton is sworn in, or 1993, when Bill Clinton is sworn in, the United States is the dominant force on this planet, the lone world power, and a lot of it was because of our military and the military spending that the Reagan administration and even Bush did in his first part of his administration. But with the Soviet Union falling, then we could cut our military, and that contributed also to saving money, helping Bill Clinton and Al Gore balance the budget and even have a surplus in their last few years. The BRAC Commission base realignment and closure was a process by the United States federal government commission to increase efficiency in the United States Department of Defense by coordinating and realignment and closures of military installations. So bases all over this country. It has a major effect on the communities. You have a base in your community. A lot of times these military bases were the largest employers in some of these small towns. And, Bill Clinton closing some of these military bases and redirecting that money back to paying off the debt and deficit, that had an effect on communities, on local communities all over this country. But that's what they did. Coordinated realignment and closure of military bases following the end of the Cold War. Over 350 installations have been closed in 5 BRAC rounds, beginning in 1988, 1991, 1993, 95, 2005. These 5 BRAC rounds constituted a combined savings of $12 billion annually. So that's $12 billion annually. But, that doesn't sound like a big deal today, but you're talking about the national debt, the entire debt at that time being, a little bit over $4 trillion, $600 billion deficit at $12 trillion annually. That helped out a lot, along with the other cuts that the Clinton administration was making. So what Bill Clinton did and what Al Gore did in the 1990s is very reminiscent to what Elon Musk and Donald Trump are doing today. But yes, Donald Trump and Elon Musk are being more aggressive because there's such more of a greater need now, because the debt is far more outrageous than it was in 1993 when Bill Clinton was sworn in. That's the podcast, folks. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you guys have a great week, and I'll see you on Friday.